Hey guys, so a lot of you have been requesting for this video for quite a while, and I haven't ever actually got to do it. The reason why is because I actually haven't had a leopard gecko for quite a while. So, this is my friend's leopard gecko. He is a snow male. A piece of hair. He's pretty big. Maybe he's a half giant. I don't know. Nobody really knows. He kind of has his mouth open long term there because he's actually kind of biting on his tongue. I don't know if you guys could see, but his tongue's kind of like, and he's biting on it. Anyways, I just want to say, within this video I'm about to do, the advice I'm gonna give about caring for leopard geckos. I hope you guys realize that this is the way breeders or collectors would keep their leopard geckos, because some of them would have 30 leopard geckos in comparison to one person or a beginner or an average pet owner who would have around 2 leopard geckos or something. It's different, and your setup, you would be kind of out of space if you have to provide a 10-gallon tank for every single leopard gecko that you have. So we keep them in a rack system. Any of you who is going to say that it's outrageous, that's animal abuse, that it's such a small enclosure, breeders and professionals are doing this. So if you're going to argue with them, if you argue with actually them and don't talk to me about it. And also, I just want to say that these animals have been in captivity for a long time. They're pretty sure if you put them back in the wild with a lot of space, they're going to be scared. So, let's just start. How to handle a leopard gecko. A leopard gecko, you want to lay your hand flat. As you could tell, this leopard gecko is very tamed, as he's just pretty much hugging on my hand and he's barely ever moving. He's the same like this to everybody else. And if you have a new leopard gecko, I would suggest that pretend this is a table or a platform. You'd have your hands around this high up, so in case if the leopard gecko walks off your hand, wouldn't be too big of a fall. Scared leopard geckos are the ones that haven't been held by humans a lot, and they don't seem to tolerate human handling. Some of them would be scared even and tend to walk around on your hand would be constantly moving around trying to catch it. And I would see that this normally occurs within younger leopard geckos, so like young juveniles or hatchlings. So that's something that if anyone's going to buy a leopard gecko soon, you should probably be careful of or keep in mind. Okay. So, a lot of people ask me if leopard geckos are great beginner reptile pets. Yes, they are. In my opinion, they are one of the easiest reptiles to keep. But at the same time, I would not fully agree that they are the ultimate best reptile for children, younger children, so let's say like 3 or 5 years old. Reason being is, after all, they are a leopard gecko, their tail is really fragile, and little kids wouldn't know what they're doing. Maybe they'll pull on it or lift it up too hard. Something like this, just gently lifting it up. If you have to check the gender, if there's any diarrhea, poop, anything like that, then that's fine. But if kids actually tug on it too hard and the gecko gets scared, it will drop its tail. Now, dropping its tail is not only scary to some people, it is definitely a weird feeling. I mean, I've had that happen to me before with my previous gecko by an accident, because my mate accidentally pushed the glass lid inside his cage, and it actually chopped it off. And it was pretty weird. I can never get used to seeing just like a fat, bloody tail wiggling around. But anyways, that is a huge problem if that happens. I mean, it's not a huge, gigantic problem, but it can lead into a huge problem. Reason being is, when the leopard gecko tail falls off, as you can see, yes, this guy is very well fed. He has a decent fat belly, and he has a fat tail. Leopard geckos actually store most of their fat in their tail, as you can see why this is so big and squidgy. So if that tail falls off, they can actually lose weight very quickly. It's very important that if you have a tailless leopard gecko, that you feed them, make sure that they eat, and another thing is you want to make sure that the wound is closed up. what I would suggest you guys use is, here we go. I have this, a very light antibiotic ointment, which you would apply to the leopard gecko. This is for avoiding the tail to have any infections. If there are infections, that can actually lead to death to your leopard gecko. Not only that, if a leopard gecko refuses to eat after the tail falls off, they can starve to death. Also, that it weakens them, you know, they would be very moody, you wouldn't want to touch them, and all that kinds of stuff. And sometimes leopard gecko can fight if you keep a couple of them more, and they would be bite marks all around the neck. Normally leopard geckos, when they breed, they bite, the males would bite on the female's neck right around here, and sometimes they could leave a few bloody marks. You want to get this. It's the Zoomed Reptile Wound Healing Aid. Sorry, that's in Hong Kong currency. But yeah, this is something that you want to get for simple wounds. Do not use this on a dropped tail, because this is actually made of java oil and tea tree oil, all kinds of really harsh medicine, and it could actually burn, if not even create an infection for the tail. Okay, now let's move on to enclosures. This is a very simple tub, and this, I would say, is the minimum size you want for a leopard gecko. Even with the breeding racks and everything, this is the simplest way to keep your leopard gecko. At the same time, they can be happy and healthy. You know, this is the way they were kept when they were first bred. This is the way. If you purchase a leopard gecko, think about their parents. Their parents would be kept in places just like this. You want a tub like this. As you can see, the leopard gecko is in there. Sorry, there's lots of like guts, cricket guts all over here. I still need to clean this cage. I just wanted to do this video first. So this is the leopard gecko in there. Now, this enclosure is definitely way too small if you do not have the correct tools to all fit in here. What I mean by that is that for a leopard gecko, on average, you should provide a humid hide, a normal hide, and a calcium dish, and a water dish. Thing is, the way we keep it here, where I would be allowed to keep it in smaller enclosures, or even some professionals would be able to keep only one hut in there, is because that some people choose to provide the moisture, like the humidity hide, while the leopard gecko is shedding. Or they actually control the humidity within the enclosure so that you only need to provide one hide, because two hides can take a lot of space. What I use here is, this is a Japanese brand, Humidity Hut for leopard geckos. Basically what this is, you can see there's a water dish up here. You put water in there, and this is made out of pottery and clay. The water will spread through all in here, and it gets really, really humid in here, actually. So this is the one hut that I would only need for my leopard gecko. When it's shedding, I put water in there. When it's not, it could be just in the dry hide. So there we go. So you can see there's still a lot of space for the leopard gecko to walk around. Now, for those of you, if you can't buy this and you want to make your own humidity hide, this dish is really too small. I mean, this would fit for a juvenile or a hatchling, actually. But what you want to do is you want to have the lid, put it on here. You want to cut a hole in here, put some, what's that thingy? Moss. Sorry, guys. Put some moss and spray it regularly. Make sure that the moss does not have, when you squeeze the moss, there's no water dripping out of it, but it's actually just damp and wet inside. Make sure you do have the lid so the leopard gecko can go in and come out, and it can still be in the humidity, and, you know, they can just figure it out themselves. Now let's talk about bedding. The bedding I choose to use for my leopard geckos is paper towel. They are clean. There's no ink coming off of it, unlike newspaper. And when leopard geckos go and eat and snatch their food, because basically when leopard geckos eat, they sneak up on their little prey and they actually zap into it, kind of like how a snake strikes. So when they do that, sometimes they could get a mouthful of aspen if you decide to give aspen, and that personally I don't think is a very good idea with any sort of loose substrates, because it's very easy for them to swallow and ingest them. Now let's talk about substrate as well. What are all the loose substrates made of? It's either Java wood chips, it's either aspen wood again, it's either sand. Now, sand is one of the things I crucially do not advise anyone use. Sand has created over all these years a lot of problems for leopard gecko owners because they keep them in sand. A lot of the pet shops tell you keep them in sand, they're from the desert, you know. Yes, they are from the desert, but as I said again, they have been captively bred for all this time. They have lost the ability to kind of take away the sand, and actually when leopard geckos eat a cricket or a mealworm or even a pinky especially, they get sand stuck onto them and the leopard gecko would ingest them. Now throughout maybe a year or even less, depending on how much they ingest, they die from having their system clogged by sand. A lot of leopard geckos die this way. Please trust me on that. You can go online and research how they have been clogging up systems of the leopard geckos, and it's been really bad for them. So sand is a definite no in my book. So I find that the safest one is paper towel. It's decently cheap. You could clean the whole thing, take the whole thing out, put the whole thing back in whenever you want. You have the Humidity Hide now. You have the Substrate. Now let's talk about cleaning or other kind of stuff. What I use to clean my reptiles is Zoom Edge Wipeout. This is a great brand. It takes away any sort of odor, and it also, it says here, disinfectant as well, cleaner and deodorizer. It smells kind of like hand sanitizer, but it is safe for a terrarium and a small animal cage. So this is actually good for reptiles and actually some other small animals. So that is all good. Now a water dish. A water dish is pretty simple. Give them a water dish. If you have a hut, if you manage to find a hut like mine, they actually lick off the water off the hut. If not, they actually go up there and use that as use this dish up here for water. And here is a little dish as well, providing for the leopard geckos calcium and vitamins. What I give is actually this brand as well, Reptile. It is a calcium with vitamin D3. Make sure that you do give vitamin D3 and calcium to your leopard geckos. A lot of leopard geckos do not get the UVB that they're supposed to get, and they can also be deformed and die from metabolic bone disease. It is another really common thing. Their fingers tend to shrivel up, their bodies go weird, and it's basically their bones going soft and melty inside, and that's not good at all. Now, let's start setting up this cage so I could show you what it looks like. You have your substrate. Put that in there. You have your hide. Put that in there. You have your little gecko. Put him in there. You have your dish. Put some calcium in there. Thing is with the calcium is that they tend to lick it off into the dish. So you can put that in there for your leopard gecko. Now a lot of people ask me about what about calcium sand? Guys, please don't believe them. Sand is sand. No matter if there's calcium in it or not, it's going to ingest it, it's going to block its system, it's going to die. So that's all I gotta say to that, honestly. You put water in your hut. Now let's talk about feeding as well. Now let me just show you what this looks like right now. Oops. Now there's this humidity hut with water in there, you can see, and there's this dish in the far. Whoops. There we go. there's this dish over here. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of space still for this leopard gecko to walk around all over here. He's inside the hut right now, if I could take it out. There we go. There he is. And there's still a lot of space for him to walk around, so you guys don't ever have to worry about your leopard gecko not really have anywhere to explore. They don't run really fast. Again, they've been captively bred, so that's just the whole entire argument I'm not even going to get into if anyone wants to talk about size, like enclosure size. Now let's talk about feeding of leopard geckos. Let me get my star over here. This is kind of the body type that you want your leopard gecko to be, with a nice thick body, not too skinny, not too fat. A nice, decent, fat tail, but again, not too fat. I've seen leopard geckos that have tails this fat, and it's only that short. That's definitely overly obese, and that's not really something you want for your leopard gecko. Being overly obese, it can cause them to have shortening of life and also a lot of other different health problems. Now, feeding for leopard geckos, on average, your basic food would be crickets and mealworms. Now, crickets, I would say, is their basic kind of meal. Mealworms should not be their staple diet, as it does contain a lot of fat and protein in it. Although that does sound good, but again, that's how leopard geckos get overly obese from it, and that can cause problems not only in leopard geckos, but in a lot of different reptiles, if you provide mealworms as their staple diet. Also, mealworms, they're not armored, like, just mealworms are kind of hard to digest in comparison to crickets or some other foods that you could select for a leopard gecko, so that's something to keep in mind. But it is a good food if you want your leopard gecko to boost up, maybe for breeding, or if you think they are a bit underweight, or even if they drop their tail, you want to make sure that they get their fattening back up. Crickets are their staple diet, I would say. Make sure that you do dust your crickets with calcium. I tend to find that mealworms do not have the calcium stick on them very well. The crickets do, though. So make sure that you dust your crickets with calcium almost every time that you feed. I would say there's two different kind of calcium powders. There's one with the D3 and there's one without D3. Now, without D3, you'd want to feed that pretty much almost every meal, maybe once every other meal. And for the D3, you want to feed that maybe once every single week. So that should be pretty much it. On average, you should be feeding your leopard gecko, I would say maybe, it depends really how the individual leopard gecko eats. On average, I would say that you should provide 7 crickets every other day. And that depends if they finish it all. Some of them would want to eat every single day, but they will only eat 4 or 3 crickets every single day. So that depends on your leopard gecko. Now, there are other foods that you could provide, such as silkworms or dubia roaches or pinkies. Now, I want to say again, pinky should only be offered to leopard geckos that are, majority of them, that are adults. How you would want to measure how big you should provide a pinky is, on a leopard gecko, you should see on the top of their head the gap between their eyes. This gap between their eyes is your perfect measurement of how wide the food you should be providing. So I would say maybe the smallest pinky you can purchase is good for a leopard gecko. Not every single leopard gecko would want to eat pinky. I certainly offered it to this guy and he didn't really want it. Again, pinky is a really high fattening food, so only feed those occasionally. Whereas something like waxworms and silkworms, it should be as well fed occasionally, as waxworms do have a lot of fat as well. So overall, crickets are the staple diet for your leopard geckos. I have seen that there are brands of leopard gecko food where it's basically dried crickets in their jar. I think it's by Zoomed. I personally do not recommend you guys to use those because, think about it, it's dried. All the nutrition, all the protein, the guts, which is where majority of the vitamins and the proteins are in, are basically sucked out and it's dried. So imagine if you were to eat dried fruits for the rest of your life. You're definitely not going to be healthy at all. Now, one last thing I want to talk about is heating. Depending on where you live, I would say the average temperature you should be keeping your leopard gecko's enclosures around 75 to 80, if not 85. Um, During the winter, I never actually heat my leopard gecko's enclosures during the summer. I do definitely do during the winter, and I do that by using heat pads. The reason why I choose heat pads over light bulbs is because any sort of UVB or UVA, which is the basking light. Let's just talk about UVA first. The UVA basking light bulbs, um, they're fine. It's just majority of the leopard geckos that you could get out there, other than normal snow, super snow, those kind of blazing blizzard sort of leopard geckos that have dark colored eyes, would be able to accept a bright shining basking light. Any leopard geckos such as Tremper albino, raptors, aptors, all those kinds of things with blood red eyes or pink eyes, those have albinoism in their blood, and having a shining bright light and for them to look at it for a long period of time can actually cause damage to their sights in the future. If not, it can actually lead them to blindness, which has happened in the history before. So I would only advise that if you have maybe a normal leopard gecko or something, a leopard gecko with dark black colored eyes, that you would want to provide basking light. Same with UVB as well. It's actually not necessary. I mean, if you really feel like you have to, go ahead. But leopard geckos are nocturnal animals, so in the wild they're not used to actually coming out in daylight. You would find that even if you provide UVB or basking light, majority of the time during the day when you have the light on, the leopard gecko is going to be inside its hut. Now, what about if you want to use heat lamps but your leopard gecko has albinoism in it? I would suggest you use something like this. This is a Reptile one. This is a low light heat source. It is a 75 watt, which is pretty hot. Definitely good for the winter. A Reptile lamp. This is a night lamp. This night lamp actually gives out a blue-purple color. If you can see the light bulb. It's dark in color. And it will give out a purple, slight glow light. This will definitely not damage your leopard gecko's eyes because, according to research, they can't see it. Still believe that they will see a bit of a dim light, but definitely not damaging to the eyes. There's also a red color, but the red color tends to be a bit brighter, and I like the purple a bit more. So, that's that. As for heating pads, that is my best recommendation for heating your leopard geckos. If you do find that the heat pad is a bit too hot with your thermometer or even your hand putting there and you're afraid of your leopard gecko getting burnt, you can actually use paper towels to put in between from the bottom of your tank to the top of the heat mat to actually adjust the temperatures that you want. I guess that's pretty much it, guys. That's your basic care. I'm sorry if those of you who have been watching my videos for a while, you know that every single one of my video, I do this by improvising. I don't have any script or anything like that. All this information I just gave you is basically what I normally do when I give to customers anyways. So guys, if you have any more advanced or other questions about leopard geckos or all kinds of reptiles, please feel free to inbox me. Just go to my channel, go to the About section, and you should probably see a Send Message tab there. And you could inbox me, and I reply as soon as I can. Normally within a day I would reply because I check it every day. So again, guys, thank you, and thank you for supporters, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. See you guys later. Bye.